"You're too quiet to lead," Nina announced to the entire conference room, her voice carrying that practiced tone of someone who thinks cruelty sounds like honesty. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some amused, others uncomfortable. The marketing director chuckled. A few junior staff members shifted in their chairs. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the mahogany table, feeling the familiar burn of public humiliation. Nina's blonde hair caught the fluorescent light as she leaned back in her chair, satisfied with her performance. She had just finished presenting my quarterly analysis strategy as her own breakthrough idea, and now she was making sure everyone understood who belonged at the top of the food chain. "Leadership requires presence," she continued, gesturing broadly. "You need to command a room, not disappear into the wallpaper." More laughter rippled through the room. I gripped my folder so tightly the edges bent, but I didn't speak. I never spoke during these moments. That's what made me an easy target. Nina smiled, that perfect corporate smile, the kind that says "I'm helping you grow" while sharpening the knife. She had no idea that my silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. Some people talk their way to the top. Others document every step of the climb. Before I tell you how this all started, I need you to understand something important about workplace dynamics. Comment below where you're watching from, and please hit that subscribe button because what I'm about to share changed everything I thought I knew about office politics. I had always been the quiet one. In school, teachers called me thoughtful. In college, professors appreciated my careful analysis. But in corporate America, quiet gets labeled as weak, passive, or worse, incompetent. That's exactly what Nina counted on when she decided to make me her stepping stone. My name is Alex, and I had been working at Morrison Digital Marketing for 3 years when Nina arrived. She walked into our department like she owned the place, which, given her connections and aggressive personality, maybe she did. She was everything I wasn't: loud, confident, politically savvy, and completely ruthless. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs earlier. The way she sized up everyone during her first week, identifying threats and allies. The way she immediately gravitated towards senior management while dismissing support staff. The way her eyes lingered on my desk when she thought I wasn't looking. But I was looking. I'm always looking. That's my superpower, even though nobody realized it yet. Growing up, I learned that observation was survival. My mother used to say I had old soul eyes because I watched everything but said little. While other kids fought for attention, I studied patterns. Who got rewarded for what behavior? Who got ignored? Who got punished? This skill followed me into my career. While colleagues competed loudly for recognition, I quietly documented what actually worked. My project success rate was higher than anyone in the department, but I never made a big deal about it. I just did the work, delivered results, and moved on to the next challenge. Nina spotted this immediately when she joined our team. During her second week, she cornered me by the printer. "You're really good at this research stuff," she said, her tone friendly but calculating. "I bet you could teach me a lot." I smiled politely and offered to help however I could. That was my first mistake. I thought she genuinely wanted to learn. I thought mentoring a new colleague was the right thing to do. I had no idea she was conducting reconnaissance, mapping out my processes so she could eventually replace me with herself. Some people see collaboration. Others see opportunity. Nina definitely saw opportunity. The interruption started small. During meetings, Nina would finish my sentences, often incorrectly, but with such confidence that people nodded along. When I tried to clarify, she'd wave her hand dismissively and say, "Right, exactly what I meant." She began scheduling collaborative sessions where she'd pump me for information about upcoming projects, client preferences, and strategic insights I'd gathered over 3 years of careful relationship building. I shared everything because that's what team players do. Every piece of information became ammunition in her personal arsenal. The worst part was watching her repackage my ideas with her signature flair for dramatic presentation. I'd spend days researching market trends and consumer behavior patterns. She'd take my findings, add flashy graphics and corporate buzzwords, then present them as breakthrough insights she'd discovered. Management ate it up. Nina had mastered the art of making herself indispensable while making me invisible. She never took credit explicitly, that would have been too obvious. Instead, she positioned herself as the brilliant strategist who had somehow elevated the team's analytical capabilities. My colleagues started coming to her first with questions about projects I had initiated. My expertise was being transferred to her account, one presentation at a time. The idea theft reached its peak during the Brennan Industries pitch. I had spent 2 weeks developing a comprehensive social media strategy that targeted their specific demographic through micro-influencer partnerships. The approach was innovative because it focused on authentic engagement rather than broad reach, something completely different from our usual campaigns. I presented the framework to Nina during one of our weekly check-ins, explaining how I'd identified key engagement patterns that their target audience responded to. Her eyes lit up with genuine interest, and I felt proud to share something that could genuinely help our agency win new business. 3 days later, Nina walked into the client meeting and presented her revolutionary micro-influencer strategy to Brennan Industries. She used my research, my demographic analysis, and even my specific vendor recommendations. The only thing she added were her polished presentation skills and her ability to sell the vision with unwavering confidence. The clients loved it. They signed a 6-month contract on the spot. Nina received congratulations from the entire senior management team, along with a performance bonus that should have been mine. I sat in that meeting watching my work receive applause while I remained completely invisible. That night, I went home and bought a small leather notebook. It was time to start documenting everything. Nina's whisper campaign began that same week. She never criticized me directly, that would have seemed unprofessional. Instead, she planted seeds of doubt about my leadership potential through carefully crafted conversations with key colleagues. Alex is brilliant analytically, she'd tell people within earshot of my cubicle, but she's just so internal. You know? Leadership requires external energy. Or she'd sigh thoughtfully and say, I worry that Alex gets lost in the data instead of seeing the big picture. These comments were designed to sound supportive while slowly poisoning my professional reputation. Nina understood that perception creates reality in office environments. If enough people started viewing me as a pure analyst rather than leadership material, I'd be effectively trapped in that role forever. The strategy worked perfectly. During team discussions, people began directing strategic questions to Nina instead of me, even when the projects were mine. They'd ask for my technical input, but they'd look to her for vision and direction. I documented every conversation in my notebook, including dates, witnesses, and exact quotes when possible. Nina thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She had no idea I was actually building a case file. The breaking point came during our quarterly department meeting. 23 people crammed into the main conference room, including senior management from other divisions. This was Nina's stage, and she knew it. The meeting was supposed to focus on upcoming projects and resource allocation, but Nina turned it into a referendum on leadership styles. She had clearly prepared for this moment, probably practicing her talking points in the mirror. I'd been thinking about what makes someone truly effective in client relations, she began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. You need someone who can walk into a room and immediately establish credibility. Someone who clients trust to guide major decisions. Then came the moment that changed everything. She looked directly at me and delivered her verdict. Alex, you're incredibly talented at research and analysis, but you're just too quiet to lead. Clients need to feel confident that their account manager can advocate for them in high-pressure situations. The silence that followed felt endless. Every person in that room was watching to see how I'd respond. Nina had publicly questioned my fitness for advancement, and everyone knew it. I simply nodded and said, I appreciate your feedback. But inside, my silence became something much more dangerous than she could have imagined. The calm after that meeting was deceptive. While Nina basked in the scattered applause from colleagues who mistook cruelty for honesty, I returned to my desk and opened my notebook to a fresh page. I didn't cry. I didn't complain to HR. I didn't fire back with my own assessment of Nina's leadership abilities, though I easily could have. Instead, I began planning with the methodical precision that had made me successful at market analysis. Nina had made one critical error in her public attack. She had revealed her strategy completely while assuming I had no defense. She thought quiet meant defeated. She was about to learn the difference between silence and surrender. That evening, I stayed late in the office and created a detailed timeline of every project I'd managed, every client relationship I'd built, and every result I'd delivered. I gathered performance reviews, client testimonials, and revenue figures that directly tied to my work. Most importantly, I began documenting Nina's pattern of taking credit for my contributions. I had emails, meeting notes, and witness accounts of her consistently presenting my work as her own innovative thinking. My notebook grew thicker each day as I methodically built evidence of what had really been happening in our department for months. Documentation became my evening routine. After Nina left each day, usually around 5:30 with great fanfare about dinner plans or workout classes, I'd pull out my notebook and record every relevant interaction from the previous 24 hours. Meeting attendance, who said what, when, and in front of whom. Project assignments. Who initiated ideas versus who received credit. Client interactions, who did the actual relationship building versus who showed up for presentation glory. The patterns were damning. Nina excelled at public performance but contributed almost nothing to the substance of our work. She was a brilliant presenter of other people's ideas, but she had never originated a successful strategy of her own. More importantly, I started noticing that other colleagues were having similar experiences. Tim from graphics mentioned that Nina had presented his design concepts as her collaborative vision. Patricia from account management complained privately that Nina kept inserting herself into her client relationships. Nina wasn't just stealing from me. She was systematically positioning herself as the creative force behind everyone else's work while we remained in supporting roles. The evidence was building into something that could no longer be ignored by senior management, if presented properly. Nina's arrogance finally created the smoking gun I needed. During our monthly strategy session, she grew frustrated with my detailed questions about project attribution and sent me an email that exposed her entire approach. Alex, moving forward, please send me your preliminary research and analysis ideas before you develop them fully. I want to make sure we're aligned on strategic direction before you invest too much time in approaches that might not work. She copied our supervisor, Marcus, on the email to make it look like professional guidance. But what she'd actually done was create written evidence of her intention to control and repackage my work before anyone else could see it. I printed that email immediately and tucked it into my growing file. Nina had just documented her own system of intellectual theft, probably without realizing it. That same week, she made another crucial mistake. During a client call, she referenced specific market research that I had conducted but that she had never seen. When the client asked for the raw data, she promised to send it over but then had to ask me for the files afterward. I provided everything she requested, but I also kept copies of her requests, which proved she was presenting research she hadn't conducted and couldn't actually support without my help. My quiet allies began emerging once I started paying closer attention to office dynamics. These were colleagues who had also been affected by Nina's credit stealing but felt powerless to address it individually. Tim approached me first. I saw what happened in the quarterly meeting, he said quietly while we waited for coffee to brew in the break room. Nina's been doing the same thing to my design work for months. Patricia joined our informal conversations a few days later. She actually told the Brennan client that she personally designed their logo concepts, Patricia confided. She has never touched graphic design software in her life. Most revealing was my conversation with Kevin, one of our junior analysts. Nina asked me to send her all my research files so she could quality check them before presentations, he told me. But then she presents the findings like she discovered them herself. We weren't just individual victims of Nina's strategy. We were an entire team whose collective expertise was being rebranded under her personal leadership narrative. The question was whether senior management would believe us if we presented our concerns together, or whether Nina's political skills would allow her to dismiss us as jealous subordinates. Kevin provided the evidence that transformed our situation from workplace gossip into potential misconduct. He showed me screenshots of a group chat where Nina and two colleagues from other departments mocked my leadership aspirations and joked about my invisible management style. The messages were worse than I expected. "Alex thinks being thorough makes her leadership material," Nina had written. "She'd probably read a manual on how to be spontaneous." Another message read, "Watching her try to command attention is like watching paint dry in slow motion." But the most damaging evidence came in Nina's response to someone asking about the upcoming departmental restructuring rumors. "Don't worry about the director position," she'd written. "They need someone with actual presence. This is basically mine already." Not only was Nina actively undermining my reputation, but she was also spreading internal information about leadership changes that hadn't been officially announced yet. She clearly had inside knowledge about restructuring plans and was already positioning herself as the inevitable choice. This gave me crucial intelligence about timing. If leadership was planning organizational changes, I needed to act quickly before Nina's campaign against me became the accepted narrative. The rumor Kevin mentioned became reality 2 weeks later when Marcus called an emergency department meeting. Our VP of Marketing, James Crawford, joined him at the front of the conference room with the kind of serious expression that signals major changes ahead. "We're expanding our client services division," Crawford announced. "Market growth has created opportunities for enhanced strategic leadership, and we're creating a director of client strategy position to oversee department operations." The room buzzed with immediate interest. This was a significant promotion opportunity, the kind that came with budget authority, team leadership responsibility, and a direct reporting line to senior management. Crawford outlined the position requirements. Strategic thinking, client relationship management, team collaboration, and proven project leadership. Every qualification perfectly matched my 3 years of experience and documented results. Nina's reaction was immediate and telling. She straightened in her chair, smiled broadly, and made eye contact with several colleagues as if the announcement were a formality before her coronation. After the meeting, I heard her telling Patricia, "This is exactly what I've been preparing for." The timing couldn't be better. Her confidence was absolute, which made what happened next even more satisfying. That night, I compiled my secret portfolio. 3 years of performance reviews, client testimonials, project results, and revenue figures that directly tied to my leadership and strategic contributions. The documentation was extensive. Emails from clients praising my innovative approaches. Meeting notes showing my strategic recommendations that had led to successful campaigns. Revenue reports proving that projects under my guidance consistently exceeded performance targets. Most importantly, I included the evidence of Nina's pattern of taking credit for work she hadn't done. The timeline I'd built showed a clear progression from collaboration to exploitation, supported by emails, witness statements, and her own documented requests for my research. I organized everything chronologically, creating a narrative that showed both my consistent contributions and Nina's systematic appropriation of credit. The contrast was stark and undeniable. The final section contained my vision for the director position, specific improvements I would implement, team development strategies I would pursue, and client relationship goals that aligned with company growth objectives. When I finished, the portfolio was 43 pages of evidence that I was not only qualified for the position, but that I'd essentially been performing director-level responsibilities without recognition for months. I requested a private meeting with James Crawford the next morning. His assistant, Caroline, seemed surprised that I wanted to discuss career development opportunities, but she scheduled me for Thursday afternoon. Crawford's office overlooked the downtown district through floor-to-ceiling windows. He sat behind a massive oak desk covered with project reports and budget documents. When I entered, he looked up with the polite attention of someone expecting a routine conversation. "Alex, good to see you." Caroline mentioned you wanted to discuss your career path? I placed my portfolio on his desk with steady hands. I'd like to be considered for the Director of Client Strategy position. I believe my track record demonstrates both the experience and vision necessary for this role. His eyebrows raised slightly. This was clearly not the conversation he'd expected from the department's quiet analyst. He opened the portfolio and began reading, his expression shifting from polite interest to focused attention. After 10 minutes of silence, Crawford looked up at me with something approaching respect. Alex, this is impressive work. Very impressive. That question was exactly what I'd prepared for. You have seen it, sir. You just haven't seen it attributed to me. I presented my evidence methodically, starting with the Brennan Industries campaign that had won Nina her performance bonus. Crawford listened without interruption as I explained my research process, showed him my original analysis files, and demonstrated how Nina had repackaged my work. This micro-influencer strategy, I said, pointing to the presentation slides on his computer screen. I developed this approach after 3 weeks of demographic research. Here's my original framework, dated 2 weeks before Nina's client presentation. Crawford's face darkened as he compared the documents. The similarities were impossible to ignore, not just in strategy but in specific language and data points that Nina couldn't have independently developed. I continued through 6 months of similar examples, each one building a stronger case that Nina's impressive track record was actually a compilation of other people's work. The evidence included my original research files, timestamped emails, and witness statements from colleagues who had seen the pattern. The most concerning aspect, I concluded, is that this isn't just about credit attribution. It's about ensuring our clients receive authentic strategic guidance from people who actually understand their needs. Crawford set down the portfolio and studied me carefully. Alex, these are serious allegations. You understand that? I nodded. Yes, sir. That's why I documented everything carefully. I believe the evidence speaks for itself. He was quiet for a long moment. It certainly does. Leave this with me. I need to review everything thoroughly. Crawford's review process moved quickly. Within 2 days, he had scheduled individual meetings with every team member mentioned in my documentation. The interviews were presented as routine feedback sessions about department operations, but I knew he was verifying my claims. Tim confirmed that Nina had presented his design concepts without attribution. Patricia verified that Nina consistently took credit for client relationships she hadn't built. Kevin provided his screenshots of Nina's group chat messages and confirmed her pattern of requesting research files only to present findings as her own discoveries. Most damaging was Marcus, our direct supervisor, who admitted that he'd noticed discrepancies between Nina's presentation content and her actual project involvement but hadn't investigated thoroughly. I assumed she was collaborating extensively with team members, Marcus told Crawford, according to Kevin, who overheard the conversation through the conference room door. I didn't realize she was systematically taking credit for their individual contributions. Meanwhile, Nina continued her confident campaign for the director position, apparently unaware that her entire track record was being fact-checked. She scheduled lunch meetings with senior staff and sent follow-up emails outlining her vision for departmental leadership. Her arrogance during this period actually strengthened my case. She was actively promoting herself based on achievements that investigation was proving she hadn't earned. Nina's campaign reached its peak during the following week's department meeting. She had clearly decided that subtle influence wasn't sufficient and that direct lobbying was necessary to secure the director position. I'd been thinking about ways to elevate our strategic capabilities, she announced to the room, projecting confidence that bordered on presumption. As someone who's consistently delivered breakthrough results, I believe I understand what clients need from enhanced leadership. She outlined a 5-point plan for department improvement that sounded impressive until you recognized the sources. Point 1 came from my Brennan Industries research. Point 3 was lifted directly from Tim's design process recommendations. Point 5 repeated Patricia's client relationship management insights almost word for word. Nina was literally campaigning for promotion based on a platform constructed entirely from other people's ideas, while those people sat in the same room listening to their work being presented as her innovative leadership vision. The irony was perfect, but it was also dangerous. If senior management wasn't aware of the attribution issues, Nina's presentation would seem like exactly the kind of strategic thinking they wanted in a director. Crawford wasn't at this meeting, which meant Nina felt safe to claim credit as broadly as possible. HR's involvement began the next morning when Crawford forwarded his findings to Patricia Valdez, our human resources director. Within hours, Nina received an urgent request for a meeting to discuss department collaboration practices. I watched Nina's face change when she read the email. Her usual confidence cracked, replaced by something approaching panic. She immediately started making phone calls, probably trying to reach her contacts in senior management to get advance intelligence about the HR meeting's purpose. By lunchtime, rumors were circulating that Nina had been called in for questioning about project attribution and team credit policies. Her allies began distancing themselves, suddenly remembering previous commitments when she tried to schedule strategy sessions. Nina cornered me near the elevator that afternoon. "Alex, I hope you know that any concerns about collaboration are probably just misunderstandings. We've always worked well together, haven't we?" Her tone was friendly, but her eyes were calculating. She was trying to determine what I knew and whether I posed a threat to her director campaign. "Absolutely," I replied with a calm smile. "I'm sure HR will clarify any misunderstandings quickly." Nina nodded, but I could see her mind racing through possibilities, trying to identify which of her actions might have triggered an investigation. Nina's desperation led to one final sabotage attempt that backfired spectacularly. The morning before her scheduled HR meeting, she sent an email to Crawford and Marcus claiming that recent team tensions were affecting department morale and productivity. "I'm concerned about the negative impact of interpersonal conflicts on our collaborative environment," she wrote. "Some team members seem to be struggling with the transition to more strategic responsibilities and maybe acting out through inappropriate channels." She didn't mention me by name, but her message clearly implied that someone was causing problems through inappropriate channels, obviously referring to my conversation with Crawford about attribution issues. Nina's email was perfectly crafted corporate sabotage, designed to preemptively discredit any accusations against her by suggesting they stemmed from personal resentment rather than legitimate concerns. Unfortunately for Nina, she sent this email after Crawford had already completed his investigation and verified every claim in my portfolio. Her attempt to frame the situation as interpersonal conflict only highlighted her willingness to manipulate facts when threatened. Crawford forwarded Nina's email to HR with a note pointing out the timing. This message was sent one day after Ms. Nina learned about the attribution investigation. The attempt to recharacterize documented misconduct as team tensions is concerning. Patricia Valdez's investigation moved swiftly once she reviewed Crawford's evidence and Nina's subsequent attempt to discredit the inquiry. HR's conclusion was unambiguous. Nina had engaged in systematic idea theft, credit manipulation, and workplace bullying. The final report cited specific examples of intellectual property appropriation, documented patterns of undermining colleague contributions, and evidence of attempting to obstruct the investigation through false characterizations. Most damaging was Nina's own email trail, which revealed her calculated approach to taking credit for others' work. Her requests for research files, her presentation schedules that consistently followed other team members' project development, and her group chat messages about colleagues all painted a clear picture. HR's recommendation was immediate removal from consideration for the director position, plus mandatory training on professional conduct and intellectual property respect. When Nina received the decision, she tried to schedule an emergency meeting with Crawford to appeal the findings. His assistant politely informed her that all HR decisions were final and that his schedule was completely booked for the remainder of the week. Nina's director campaign was over before it had officially begun. 3 years of careful political maneuvering had collapsed in less than 2 weeks once someone finally documented what she'd been doing. Friday morning brought an unexpected email from Crawford's office. "Please join us Monday at 9. 0 a.m. for a brief meeting regarding department strategic planning. The message was brief, professional, and completely mysterious. I spent the weekend wondering whether this was routine follow-up to the HR investigation or something more significant. Nina had been conspicuously absent from the office Friday afternoon, and rumors suggested she was considering internal transfer options. Monday morning arrived with nervous anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing my most professional outfit and bringing a leather portfolio that contained additional strategic planning documents I'd prepared over the weekend. Crawford's office felt different when I entered. More formal somehow, with additional chairs arranged around his conference table. Patricia Valdez was present, along with Marcus and another senior executive I recognized but hadn't met personally. "Alex, please have a seat," Crawford began, his tone unreadable. "We'd like to discuss your career development and some upcoming opportunities." My heart raced as I realized this might be the conversation I'd been preparing for my entire career. 3 years of careful work, detailed documentation, and quiet competence had led to this moment. I sat down with steady hands and waited to learn my future. After thorough review of recent departmental dynamics and strategic requirements, Crawford began, "We've decided to offer you the Director of Client Strategy position." The words hung in the air for a moment before their full impact registered. I was being promoted to the position Nina had considered automatically hers, the role she'd campaigned for based on work she hadn't done. Patricia Valdez smiled warmly. "Your portfolio demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and collaborative leadership we need. The evidence of your contributions over 3 years was remarkable." Marcus added, "I realize I should have recognized your leadership potential earlier. You've been performing director-level responsibilities without appropriate recognition or compensation." The senior executive I hadn't met introduced himself as VP of Operations William Torres. "We're particularly impressed by your approach to team development and client relationship building. Those skills will be essential as we expand the department." I accepted the position with gratitude and confidence, knowing I'd earned it through actual performance rather than political manipulation. The quiet analyst was about to become the strategic leader Nina had claimed I could never be. The irony was perfect. Nina's public assertion that I was too quiet to lead had triggered the investigation that revealed her own lack of authentic leadership credentials. My first team meeting as Director of Client Strategy took place Wednesday morning. The same conference room where Nina had humiliated me 3 weeks earlier now hosted my introduction as departmental leader. 23 faces looked at me with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and anticipation. Tim smiled broadly from his usual seat. Patricia nodded with genuine approval. Kevin looked amazed that the quiet analyst was now running strategic operations. Nina sat in the back row, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes blazing with barely controlled anger. She had returned from her personal days that morning to discover the promotion announcement waiting in her inbox. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "I'm excited to discuss our strategic direction and the collaborative approach we'll be taking moving forward." I outlined my vision for authentic team leadership, transparent project attribution, and shared strategic development. Every principle directly contradicted Nina's competitive, credit-stealing approach. As I spoke, I could see colleagues relaxing, finally able to envision a department where their contributions would be recognized and their expertise valued appropriately. Nina's discomfort was visible, but she couldn't object to policies promoting fairness and collaboration without revealing her opposition to those values. "Before we conclude," I said, wrapping up my first directorial presentation, "I want to address something important about communication and leadership styles." I looked directly at Nina, then around the room at each team member. Some people believe that effective leadership requires being the loudest voice in the room. I disagree. True leadership means understanding every voice and helping each person contribute their best work. The room was completely silent, but the attention was electric. Everyone understood that I was addressing Nina's previous criticism while establishing a new departmental philosophy. "Quiet doesn't mean incapable," I continued. "It often means someone is listening carefully, thinking strategically, and preparing to lead with wisdom rather than volume. Nina's face flushed red, but she remained silent. Any objection would have revealed that she recognized my words as a direct response to her public humiliation campaign. I gathered my notes and stood up from the head of the conference table. Thank you all for your time. I look forward to building something remarkable together. As I walked toward my new office, the corner space that had been reserved for the director position, I passed Nina's desk. She was staring at her computer screen, but I could feel her watching me. 3 weeks ago, she had declared me too quiet to lead. Today, I was leading the department she thought she deserved. Quiet preparation had defeated loud presumption.